This is more like it.
Well, it wasn't to be the home victory that Hull City so craved, but it was at least a point on the board to break the run of defeats and give City fans something positive to chew over until the next home game comes along. A 1-1 draw against Norwich. Well, how to feel, really? How do we all feel after that? It was a game where Norwich started... Similarities actually with the game at Burnley. At Burnley, City started the first couple of minutes really well and then fell behind after 3 minutes. Here, Norwich started fairly brightly for the first couple of minutes, had a free kick which landed just under Pandor's crossbar. But then City took control and created one or two really good chances. Alzate plugged one wide. Lovely ball from Alzate to Joe Galhart, who prodded towards the far corner, and Angus Gunn... you might remember Angus Gunn from the game in January. Aaron Connolly certainly does. Anyway, Angus Gunn made a really good save, tipping it away to his right. The chances kept coming. City kept pressing. They were getting lots of joy down there right with Crooks kind of feeding in, Louis Coyle going beyond, and Joe Galhart as well. And that's where the goal came from after 14 minutes. Galhart clipped the ball over for Coyle to run right to the byline inside the 6-yard box. He cut it back, and there was Matt Crooks running in to blast into the corner. Just a quick plug, actually, for Matt Crooks, because we spoke to him on Friday ahead of this game. Really interesting guy is Matt Crooks, and I don't know if you know, he suffers from epilepsy. We spoke to him about that. I mean, he also spoke to us about Jordan Sinnott, the former Chesterfield player who was tragically died fairly recently, and Matt was his best friend. He dedicated his goal at Sheffield United to Jordan as well, and that goal today would have meant an awful lot to Matt Crooks. So we spoke to him yesterday, and we put it up as a podcast on the 1904 Club. So if you've not listened to that, go and listen to that. So yeah, Crooksy scored after 40 minutes, and a bit like the Stoke game a few weeks ago, actually, where City were really dominant in the game. They were playing well. They were like immediately after the goal, they were on the front foot, and you're thinking, right, go on then, go and get that second goal, go and kill this game off, because they'd got Norwich kind of pinned back, and Norwich at that stage had got no real answer to City pressing forward. But as the half wore on, everything they did in terms of getting forward and creating all those chances in the first 15 minutes, they stopped doing. And Norwich, I don't know how much of that was City. We see it so often, don't we, in football matches, where, particularly in the Championship, where teams go hell for leather, they score the goal, and then they sit back and then allow the other team to come onto them. And that's so I don't know how much of that was City sitting back and how much of it was Norwich kind of in midfield getting a lot of control in the game and starting to dominate. Although, for all their for all their possession, I think they only had one shot on target in that first half, and City got through to half-time with that lead intact at 1-0, something they didn't do, as we know, against Stoke, when now Ali Al-Hamadi scored that goal just before the break. So you're thinking, right, that's a big step for them to go in at 1-0, and they've got in at 1-0. They've kept Norwich out. There was a lot of tension, a lot of nerves in the stadium. You could sense it, but they dug it out, and they got there with relative calm, to be honest. Norwich, as I say, they had a lot of pressure, but without really looking like scoring. And I know Duffy headed one wide from a free kick, but that was it. And you're like, okay, they've got in at half-time at 1-0, great. Now let's build on that and go again in the second half, and maybe try and... It would get nervy if they didn't get that second goal, but try and, see... You knew there would be a reaction from Norwich early in the second half, but try and see that through. Give yourself a platform to build on, and go and see it out and build on it. But obviously, they just, at home, they cannot do that. And, it was kind of comical in how it came about, because there was a squirrel got on the pitch. The squirrel was tear-arsing down the right-hand side of the pitch. Unfortunately, City got a bit mesmerised by that, and Fisher got down the right, pulled over a cross, and in front of Alfie Jones was Josh Sargent, in form. That's his 5th goal in 5 games against the Tigers, and he glanced a lovely header across the corner and into in off the post, and that was 1-1. And you kind of feared a bit for City at that point, because they were, Norwich were knocking on the door a bit. But that said, there were lots of nearly moments, balls in and around the penalty area. Sainz, the Championship's top goal scorer with 15 goals, hit the post late on. But it's hard to say that Pandor really got tested. I think Norwich only had 3 shots on target in the game. They didn't exactly... Yeah, he did, Alex. That was quite comical, wasn't it? the squirrel moment. But, you know, Norwich had a lot of moments, nearly moments. As I say, Sainz, when they didn't clear a corner, it bobbled at the back post. There was a bit of a scramble. He prodded, it hit the outside of the post. It came back to him. He prodded back towards goal, and somebody got a blocking because it went out for a corner. But it's not like they were peppering the penalty, the goal. It's not like Pandor had save after save. He made a couple of saves, but they were both fairly comfortable. Norwich, there was one moment where they put the ball across the face of the box, and maybe in previous weeks, possibly, that gets turned in and City lose the game. At the other end, there were one or two other nearly moments for the Tigers. But yeah, I think Norwich, there was a penalty shout on McLaughlin in the second half. Norwich will probably say they should have won the game. You look at the chances, the stats were fairly even, 60-40 in terms of possession, but I don't think Norwich did a huge amount with it. I think a point is probably about a fair result. And it is frustrating, isn't it? Because, you know, it's a game where, yeah, Luke, I agree. Look, I think let's not shy away from it. It's a home game where, you know, I felt they'd get something today. I thought they might win the game. We know their struggles at home, but sometimes you have to be respectful of that point, and we've said it before when they've got points on the board in the Championship. This is a team that aren't used to winning football matches, and we'd all love them to turn up to the MKM Stadium against, let's be fair, one of the top scoring. Norwich have scored 50 goals. I think the third most goals in the league this season, behind Leeds. So they are free scoring. We know that, and they've kept them out. And sometimes you've got to get a line in the sand when you're at home, when you're not winning games at home. Like you say, Luke, it is something to build on. Now they have to build on it. And we keep saying this. We've said this throughout the season. When they've got good results, be it draws or wins, they've got to find some consistency. And they're out the bottom three now. They're clear. They're only a point clear, but they're a point clear. Obviously, Derby was smashed to pieces at QPR last night. Luton were beaten again today, albeit at home to Sheffield United. Plymouth were beaten again. Portsmouth, great win for them. Cardiff got a late draw against Bristol City. It's still in their own hands. What I would say is their next game, the next couple of games, Plymouth and Oxford at home, that they are must-wins. I know Oxford have had some good results under Gary Rowett. I wouldn't rule them out. I know you look at the table, I think they're 8 points clear of City as we sit tonight. City have got a game in hand. If they that is at Cardiff, admittedly, but if they could win that, and if they were to beat Oxford at home, that claws that gap back. It's firmly in their own hands, and I think sometimes you've just got to. It sounds daft at this stage of the season, but it's little baby steps, and I think at home we're talking baby steps, and it would have been great to have gone on and beat Norwich, particularly given, you know, Norwich are in and around the top six. They tonked us 4-0 down there back in October. As I say, in science they've got the, 15 goals before today. He was the top scorer in the league, so they've got good players. Sargent's in good form. I know they've had a couple of dodgy results, but they're a good side, in and around the top six as they have been all season. So, like I say, it's frustrating that they've not been able to build on that early goal and for all their good play, but they've shown a different side of it. They've scrapped, they've battled, and they've got themselves a point. And if you can't, as we've said a million times this season, if you can't win it, whatever you do, don't lose it. And you just never know how precious that point come the end of the season may well be. But as I say, and we keep saying this, their destiny is in their own hands. And as Ruben said, every point is gold. And if they can keep churning out points here and there, they're going to give themselves a chance. And it was important, I think, after two straight defeats, to get something on the board. And they've done that. Obviously, the next game, next Saturday, early kick-off away at Sunderland, we all know how difficult that's going to be. But Sunderland are beatable. They've gone to Sheffield United, who are a better team than Sunderland, and they've gone top today, Sheffield United, albeit that's ahead of the game on Monday. And they've produced a result and a performance. So this team can do it. The biggest problem we've had with this team all season has them been doing it 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games on the spin. They haven't been able to. It's been win a game, lose a game, win a game, lose a game, or win a game, draw a game, lose a game, and that's been the theme of the season. Yeah, Peter, I think that was part of the problem in the first half, wasn't it? Once they'd scored, they couldn't keep the ball, and particularly in that midfield area with Alzate, Crooks and Slater, they just could not keep hold of the ball for long enough, and they kept surrendering possession and in transition. But what I would say, and I know the goal they conceded was really poor. The cross and how Sargent got ahead of Jones. But Sargent's a very, he's one of the best strikers in this league. And sometimes as much as you criticise Jonesy for being a bit slow off the mark on that point, you do have to credit the striker. He's a very good striker, and he won't be at Norwich next season. I would be very surprised if that, because Norwich aren't going to get promoted. I'd be very surprised if they got promoted. Strikers like Sargent are worth their weight in gold, so I would be amazed if he was still playing in the Championship next year, but we'll see. So maybe give a bit of credit to the striker. Yeah, Alex, and that's an issue, isn't it? Getting that second goal. We talk about it so often about their inability to get that second goal in games. They did it at Sheffield United, fantastic, but at home, we've seen it against Stoke, we saw it against Watford, and we've seen it again today that they've taken the big step of getting in front, and getting in front in games is not particularly proven to be a problem for them, but taking that next step and getting that second goal is the problem for them, and that's something they're going to have to do. And unless they can see a game out, which, as we've seen at home throughout the season, they struggle to see games out when they get in front. We saw it against Burnley back in October. Simon scores just before half time. They can't see it out, and they're always susceptible. Yeah, Charlie, the flanks were a problem. Although I thought, for the most part, given what he was up against, I thought Louis Coyle did well today. I know Louis gets a lot of hammer, and Sean obviously with the goal as well. I thought the fullbacks, given the opposition, I thought the fullbacks did relatively well today. Yes, the goal is a problem, but this is the Championship, and I think to go through a 90-odd minute game and not allow the other opposition to create any chances, that isn't reality. They're going to create a chance, and chances are, what they did really well was shielding the front of the, kind of shielding through the channels in the middle of the pitch, and they tried to force them out wide, and ultimately that's where the goal came from. But I think it's unreasonable to expect that a team with the quality that Norwich have got aren't going to go through a game and not create a chance, and they did, and they took it, and fair play. But I think City, on the whole, defensively, actually were given, again, you're up against Sainz and Sargent. I actually thought they dealt with that fairly well. Yeah, you can criticise the goal, and yes, and that's fair. But for the most part, they dealt with the threat relatively well. I thought they needed a bit more protection from the midfield in that first half, but they tightened it up second half. Norwich didn't quite get through as many times. And Paul, I'll come to that question in a minute. They tightened it up, and I thought defensively, for the most part, against the opposition, they were decent. Who was it that asked that? Paul. Burstow and Kamara. Inconsistent, and that's why they are playing in the Championship, I think is fair to say, isn't it? Kamara on his days, we saw him against Leeds, was unplayable. He's looked good in spells. He's looked good at times, but it's that consistency. And Burstow, it's difficult for players when they're, Burstow's not really had, he's not had a flurry of starts, and he's shown glimpses. The winner against Swansea, obviously the equaliser, the goal at Middlesbrough, the header, but the ball through against Leeds for Kamara's wonderful first goal after a couple of minutes, 5 minutes or so. But again, and I thought he did okay for a bit when he came on, but there's half a chance late on, wasn't there? We had a free kick, and it went to the back post, and he lost possession inside the penalty area. To his credit, he got back and blocked the tackle to stop Norwich getting away in the final moments. But I think frustration is the overriding thing from Kamara, from players like Burstow. They've obviously got talent. They're moment players, aren't they? They're not consistent players. They're not. You look at some players that deliver time and time again. You think of last season, and you had Carvalho, Delap, Philogene. They delivered time and time again. City aren't at that level this season, and I think Kamara, with respect, Kamara was brought in as a player to develop. He was never signed as a player that was going to play every week, because you've got Miller and you've got Bellumi. They were your two frontline wingers. Because of the injuries to Miller and Bellumi, tragically, you'd got kind of the emphasis has then been put on a 21-year-old in Kamara, who's never really played at that level. Yes, he did really well at League One, but the same with Louis Barry. Louis Barry did brilliantly in League One, it's a big step up into the Championship, particularly in a team that are struggling. So I think some of the criticism of Kamara is justified. I think some of it is unfair, and I think he gets an extra element of criticism because of his languid style, the way he is. That's his style. He's not a hal for leather player. He's not an in-your-face player, but he is talented, and I think City need to. I do believe that City need to stick with him, and they shouldn't, sack him off. I think he needs, he's had stuff going on behind the scenes as well. So I think he's a player that they should persist with, but it's not as black and white as I think. Just he's not producing. He's inconsistent, and that is why he's playing for a team at the bottom of the Championship. If he was more consistent, he'd be playing for Burnley, Sheffield United, Leeds, or he'd be in the Premier League, wouldn't he? I think that is the same with a lot of City players that on their day they can be brilliant, but those days are infrequent because they are playing for Hull City at the bottom of the Championship. And I think that is the case. So it's like Joe Gowhart. I thought Gowhart was good today again. But again, if he was uber consistent, he'd be in the Leeds United team, wouldn't he? He wouldn't be on the fringes of the first team and then sent off to Hull City at the bottom end of the league. So I think we have to put it in perspective. But I do think, with Kamara, he is a player that is worth persisting with, and I think he'll be better for this experience this season. Hopefully it ends in survival, and it gives them a platform to build on over the course of the summer ahead of next year. In terms of Puerta, look, just give me 1 second, I've got a really dry throat, apologies. The thing with Puerta, and I know there's a lot of comment on it on social media about Puerta and the accusation that he's not being played because of this clause. Well, from what I understand, he's nowhere near meeting that clause. It's not like if he comes on once more, they've got to pay €3 million to Leverkusen and they can't afford to do it. From what I'm hearing, that clause, that magic figure is quite a way further down the track. So the manager is very honest. He's being very honest in that he's not being played because he's been unfortunate, but he feels that at the minute he's got better options in front of him. And I think sometimes in football, and we're all guilty of this as fans, that when perhaps results aren't going as you would wish, players out of the side become better players. And don't get me wrong, Puerta is a very, very technically gifted footballer, but when I look at that game today, do I think that him coming on changes the game in their favour? Or him starting changes it? I'm not sure it does. He's another player that's got talent, of course he has, but he's only 21. He's a young player, and he's inconsistent. If he wasn't inconsistent and he hadn't got a lot to learn, do you think Leverkusen would sell him to Hull City in the Championship? Of course not. So, or let him go on loan with an obligation to buy after an X amount of games. So I think we have to be careful not to put to try and drive a narrative that Gustavo Puerta is the best player in the Championship, the best player that Hull City have got, and that putting him in the team are going to solve all their problems. I'm not sure that is the case. I think he's been unfortunate. I personally probably would have started him in the team today, but I don't see him in training 5 days a week. So you have to trust the manager. And in fairness, as some of you have pointed out already, you've got Elliot Matarzo, you've got Regan Slater, you've got Alzate, who's playing really well. And I think Matarzo, in terms of one or two have mentioned why was he dropped today with Slater. I actually stick up for Regan, and I thought they missed his energy and his drive at Burnley in that first half. That tigerish kind of willingness to make tackles and win the ball. It doesn't always work out. Regan's inconsistent. That's why he's here. But I think Matarz would obviously come from Monaco, having not played a lot of games, has been thrust in. He's played a few games. I think with 2 games in the space of 3 days, I think Ruben was wanting to freshen it up a bit, and that's fine. It wasn't. I don't think Matarzo. I thought he was fairly average, if not below average at Burnley actually. But I think it was more to try and just create some freshness in that midfield. So yeah, on Puerta, I genuinely look. You can only go by what you're being told, and the feeling behind the scenes is that Salas isn't being told to not play him. There's nothing like that. He's just got options, and as I said before, that they've got room there even before any clause is activated. There is scope for the manager to play him if he needs him, and if the manager wants to play him, he'll play him, and they'll have to pay if it comes to it, and they have to pay. Well, they have to pay, and that's. That is there. It's there, isn't it? But I like Puerta. I rate him, but I'm not getting the clamour for him to be in the first name on the team sheet and he's got to play, and everything else is suddenly fixed if he plays. But again, it's a game of opinions, isn't it? For my opinion, that, you know, he's all right, he's good, but he's not the answer to the prayers. Somebody else, another fan, will would disagree, and that's absolutely everybody's prerogative. Of course it is. Yeah, Paul, I felt Gowhart was good. Didn't think he was great at Burnley. I come back to that point. I feel like I'm labouring now, inconsistencies, and they've got to try and get that into the game. But Gowhart's another one. You know, he hasn't played all season, and he's another player that is having to, you know, keep going to the well and keep delivering, and will get better as time goes on. So Matazo is another one. Crooks, Gowhart, all these players that have not played, and ultimately City have had to, because of their predicament, they've had to sign a lot of players in January or in the winter window that haven't played, and they are Louis Barry. You know, I thought Louis Barry played well in the first half, faded towards the end, but played well. Struggled at the start of the second half. He just ran out of gas, and I've seen some criticism of Ruben for taking him off. He was knackered, and I think you have to bear in mind as well with Louis Barry, he's 21. He's learning about the Championship. He's coming from League One. He had an injury at Aston Villa, which is why the move didn't happen until really late in the window. He's had a couple of cameos off the bench. He's still getting to grips with his match fitness. So again, expecting him to go and play 80, 90 minutes in his first home game is a big ask. So, you know, that was why that change was made. It was purely because he was knackered. But I thought, from what we saw of it, I thought he carried the ball well. He was tricky, created some really good moments in that first half. So that, again, that promising. I just think that I feel better today, and I hope, I'm sure some of the fans will as well. I feel that it's a line in the sand today. You know, they've not lost. Norwich is always a difficult game. They've got a point on the board, and they've got some very winnable games coming up. And ultimately, it's in their hands. They'll either grasp the opportunity and survive, or they won't. And they've got to, at some point, you know, take that chance and start winning some games. So, in terms of, sorry, I'll just go back a second to find out who asked about Luke about Zambrano. He was named in the EFL squad, wasn't he, last week? I'm led to believe that his CAS hearing is towards the end of the month. So we're trying to find out a bit more on that. So once we've got that, we'll let you know. But yeah, he's got his hearing into that 16-month doping ban towards the end of the month. Ruben Sayers was supposed to have a Zoom meeting with Zambrano a couple of weeks ago. That didn't happen. As I'm aware, it still hasn't happened yet. But ultimately, the boy's got a case to fight, hasn't he? And try and overturn. Well, not. I don't think he's going to overturn it. But get it lessened. Yeah, Tony, I agree with you. So many times this season we've come away going, how the hell have they lost that? We've done it twice in the last couple of weeks, haven't we? QPR and Stoke. And they could have lost that today. Norwich were a better team than both QPR and Stoke. And probably Middlesbrough as well, actually. But they've got a point on the board. Yeah, Alex, I agree with you. Phil, they've got something. It's not the win we craved. It's not the win that we're so desperate for. And I'll be honest with you, I'm sick to death of having to write stuff about the home form, of having to go to every press conference and ask players and the manager about the home form. It's boring. We're all sick to the back teeth of it. The fans are watching it. The players have... Look, we all want to win games. Obviously, nobody goes to football wanting to lose. But at least they've not lost today. And it gives them a platform, doesn't it, for the next couple of home games. They have got some very winnable games coming up at home. And they'll be nervy, they'll be tense. But they're gradually, incrementally looking better and better as time goes on. And some of these players are starting to get fitter and fitter. And, you know, it's a point on the board. And as I said before, it isn't the 3 that we crave. But sometimes you've just got to take the point, move on with your life, and hope that you can back it up. And, yeah, Charlie, on Hughes, it's a real conundrum, isn't it, for the manager? Because Hughes is a very, very good centre-half, and Palmer's a match winner. And I really like Casey. He's a great cat. I see him every time I go to the training ground. He always comes out to say hello, and he's a great character, really buoyant, effervescent creature. And on his day, he's a match winner. And you can't have enough of those in and around your team. And, you know, a fully fit Casey Palmer, you know, in your team or coming off the bench, has got something to offer. And in any point of the season, but particularly in the predicament that the Tigers are in, having Casey available, fit, and capable of delivering a moment, because it's about moments, isn't it? These games are about moments. You know, Regan had one second half when Norwich gave the ball away and he fizzed it at the goalkeeper. If that goes a yard either side, maybe it's in the back of the net and you win the game. And City need to rely on moments in the next 14 games if they're going to survive. And you know, they've got enough quality now. I believe they've got enough quality in that team, in that squad, to get enough to finish a place above the bottom three. I look at Derby and Pound, you know, I look at the bottom three and there's nothing there that suggests to me that team is better than Hull City. I look at Cardiff, I look at Portsmouth, who've had fair credit, they've had a couple of great wins on the spin. I look at Oxford. I genuinely, and I can be hammered for this, and you can debate it all day long, I genuinely don't believe that those teams are better than Hull City pound for pound. But what I think, what you think, what is written on paper means jack. It's about delivering out on the pitch, and that's what they've got to do in the final 14 games. Look, right, that's it from here. Thanks for your questions, everybody. We will have the podcast for you on Monday, all being well, and then we'll be back at the training ground on Thursday to look ahead to Sunderland, which is the 12:30 kickoff at the Stadium of Light. So we'll be there, of course, and hopefully we'll see some of you there. Get your questions in at the 1904 Club on Twitter. And thanks for watching, everybody. Have a good weekend, and we will see you again.